Welcome to Needy and Normal. I'm your host, Ashley Levering, mom, wife, and life coach. After years of coaching and learning from my own life, one thing is clear. Meeting your needs is essential for living your best life. Here, we'll talk about those needs and not only learn to accept them, but also tend to them without guilt. Let's get needy because it's normal. Spoiler alert. I am going to give a little bit of my own take and review of the movie that Amy Adams stars in on Netflix called Nightbitch. The title alone there's just a lot there, but I want to dig into it from a mom's perspective and what I noticed about the experiences she went through. And I say spoiler alert because I am going to kind of take you through the movie because I'm going to make use of it and you're going to see why. So this episode is for the moms, especially a burned out mom, especially a mom who's seeking her own identity or has lost her identity or is feeling lost just generally, or is just feeling burnt out on the mom game, who cares so deeply and tries so hard, and it's just a lot sometimes. But there's two great, big, huge mistakes in particular that I have pulled from this film, and I am going to dive into that today. These mistakes are so common, and I want to help you not just avoid them, because I think in some ways it could be unavoidable. Sometimes we do have to kind of go through stuff, but especially if you're in it, I want to help you notice it, figure out what you need, normalize that this happens to a lot of people, and then find a way to process it and maybe even get to a place where you might know what to do about it. In fact, I believe you will know what to do about it. So let's begin. So the story centers around this mom. And I'm just going to speak in general terms so that it kind of does the every mom thing, right? You're going to see yourself in some of this. I sure did. Oh my gosh. So you have a mom, you have a dad, and you have a 2-year-old. Right? And you see in the very start of this movie, just this repetitive get up, feed the kid, take the kid to the park, get the kid lunch, help him take a nap, play with the kid more, read the book, have him, and she was co-sleeping, and have him go to bed with her all over her face. Like she never had a minute. And so you see all of this, and then you start to learn that she was this renowned, really well-to-do, really talented artist when she goes to library time and meets other moms, and they're just so impressed with what she used to do, what she used to be, and she starts really realizing, oh my gosh, like I'm just a mom. I gave all that up, right? So you see the life just draining out of her face. You see her looking in the mirror and not recognizing herself. You see just the redundant, repetitive overwhelm that just continues and continues, right? And then you start to realize, where's the husband? Well, he comes home from a trip at one point, so he travels for work and he's gone a lot. And they start to have this conversation very lightly about how she does all the things and he is off working and traveling, and they had this argument about how much she does, and when he comes home and tries to chip in, he continues to ask for her help. There's a scene where she's laying on the couch trying to just collect herself because he's home and trying to just give in and let him do bath time, right? And she's totally trying to take this moment and common moment, I'm sure, where he's far enough away that he has to kind of yell from the bathroom, where's the soap? Where's this? Can you grab that? Can you start the oven? Blah, blah, blah. And starts kind of asking her to chime in and help. And so she goes in the bathroom, hands him something, whatever he asked for. And she said, do you know that when you're gone, I do all of this by myself? And I thought about that, which of course I connect to because I'm I'm her in a lot of ways with my husband who travels, as you know. And I think about that all the time. Like, wow, I do a lot of things by myself. I had done a lot of things by myself. And so this concept of choosing to be a stay-at-home mom, giving up this passionate side of you, is something a lot of moms do. And a lot of times it's a choice because we think we have to. We think we have to dedicate to our kids in such a huge, huge way and take on that role completely. And it's hard to imagine dividing ourselves into the working mom and the stay-at-home mom. And let me say what a privilege it is to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. That was a privilege given to me. When we moved here, my husband had the financial ability to support us, which meant I was able to stay at home. And I chose that role of a stay-at-home mom kind of reluctantly, because if you think about, if you kind of find your passion and you find your thing and then you think you have to give it up for your family, it's still going to be there. It's still going to live in you. So I was in a weird place. You go back to the beginning of these episodes. I was in a weird place where I wasn't really sure what I was meant to do. So quote unquote, giving up my career to be a stay-at-home mom felt like the only choice and the only option, and to be that consistent caretaker and parent. And this character that Amy Adams plays does that, right? She makes the ultimate sacrifice. I need to be the consistent. I need to be the mom all the time, fully here for the kid because my husband is traveling, he's taking care of the family, and this is my role. So she makes this choice, right? But over 2 years of being in this repetitive overwhelm, she starts to lose touch with that person. And so mistake number 1 is completely and totally giving up who you are as far as what you're passionate about, whether it's a career or a hobby or whatever it is. But typically this happens in the form of career, right? In some way we give up our careers. And so she made a huge mistake, because even if you are all about the stay-at-home mom life and you think it's amazing, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you can argue with me all day long. Every woman and everyone has something that they are passionate about. And if you don't want to go off and do it as a career, there is something that you would absolutely love to clear your calendar for. If someone said, go for it, all good, everything's fine. We always need permission. It's so rare to just give it to ourselves, because we get in this rut of sacrifice and work hard and do what we need to do, and that thing over there is a luxury. And so I'll just leave it over there because I have responsibilities. Sound familiar? It's not just moms that do this, but it is particularly moms who do this. So you see in the movie, she is getting to her breaking point. Now, if you've seen the movie or you plan to go see it, there is a whole entire element of this film that I'm really not going to touch on, which is that she kind of starts to become a dog at night and run off and let her, wildness out. And that is an entire other piece of symbolism and metaphorical, and maybe it's supposed to be realistic, but I'm not going to touch that. I don't judge it. There's nothing wrong with that. This is a book. There's probably so much meaning in that side of it, right? Because she wanted to break free. She wanted to escape because she was so overwhelmed. So I will say that, but I'm not going to dig too much deeper into that different take on motherhood. But I will say she did give up her identity, that she gave up the thing she was the most passionate about that made her money and made her feel relevant and something that she was passionate about. So that was gone, and she starts to feel that, right? She starts to feel this resentment towards her husband because she used to travel and go out with friends and do all these things, and you see this life that she used to have just so far away from her. And so she starts looking at her husband as the problem. And eventually she gets to her breaking point. She unleashes on him. She says, I can't do this anymore. And you see this distraught husband, and you can tell this he cares and wants her to be okay. And they have this conversation where he basically says, how come you didn't tell me? How come you never said anything like this before. I'd had no idea you were suffering. So mistake number 2, suffering so much for so long, so quietly. He had no idea she was feeling so far away from herself, that she was feeling that overwhelmed, that she was feeling resentful. He had no idea. And continuing the spoiler alerts, she got to a point where instead of giving it an actual chance, she just called it off and said, I can't do this. I can't be married. We have to separate. So they start living this life where he takes the kid on the weekends and she has a little more freedom and she starts painting again and she starts to finally kind of reconnect to herself. Well, there's a scene where he comes back and drops off the kid and she said, how'd it go? And he said, yeah, it was good. And he just kind of fades off and she looks at him and he goes, yeah, it was awful. I have no idea how you do this. And that was one of the parts where I got very teary-eyed, because one of the things moms need the most is to be recognized for how fucking hard it is. It's hard, especially if you are on from wake up to shut eye. Like if you wake up and go to bed taking care of your child and trying to find even just 30 seconds for yourself throughout the day to go pee and feed yourself. And I know what that's like. And for someone to look right at you and say, oh my gosh, I get it now. I don't know how you've done this. So you see this part happen in the movie, and my coach self thinks, God, you guys could have had this conversation months ago. But you also understand that he had to go through it. He had to see through her lens to really grasp how it's been for her, right? And so even though they were on this separation, they were apart from each other, trying this, what it would feel like to be divorced lifestyle, they began to come back to each other, right? Because they started talking. And so I really stand by this mistake of not speaking up. Communicating about your experience to the person who's supposed to care the most and who's supposed to have your back and be there for you is the utmost, right? Let them in. And in the movie, granted, like you don't get a full snapshot of what this pretend life is like, but you don't see her really reach out to family. You don't really see her reach out to friends. You do see her start to create relationships with other moms, which is really important because moms need moms. I repeat, moms need moms. We get it. But support is huge, and you can't get support unless you speak up. So in this very tender moment where he's understanding her perspective, it's just amazing. So they start to come back to each other, and she starts to find balance, because once she let him in and she made these friends, she started painting again. She got a glimpse of what it was like to be with herself again, and she finally got the kid to sleep in a bed on his own, which is like a whole other thing because she used an interesting tactic. If you've seen the movie, if you plan to, I know I'm spoiling a lot, but regardless, somehow she managed to get this kid off her chest every night. And if you're a mom who's co-slept and hasn't had a good night's sleep because of that, that is probably one of the greatest wins in motherhood of all time, is to finally get your kid not just to sleep, but sleep away from you. And they can feel safe and secure in doing that. So you just see her kind of come back to herself, and the couple, like she and her husband, come back to each other, right? And I am going to go all the way to the end here. And at the end of the movie, they have another baby. It's supposed to tell the audience that they're okay and they made it through this really challenging time, and they got through it, and now they're continuing on with your family. And if you choose to have another kid after you've had a really, really hard, traumatic experience with the first kid, like, you're incredibly strong and resilient and loving, and have gotten to this incredible place where you recognize your journey, but you know how capable you are. It's just a beautiful, magical, hard thing. And bravo, I did it too. Like, I couldn't believe I was ready to have another kid after having a really, really hard and probably very long postpartum just struggles, because life is just wild. But if you're able to get to that point, like, amazing, amazing. And so it's beautiful, right? You see this moment, and you realize how far they've come, and she's come back to herself. So even though there were two mistakes made, leaving her own identity and not speaking up in order to get the kind of support and understanding she needed, even though she made those two mistakes, and we all do it, right? Everybody can understand this. The movie also shows how they went through this long transition of, we made this decision, I didn't like the decision, it got really hard, I kept it to myself, it got overwhelming, I got resentful, finally finally she took action, and finally they talked about the most important things, and then they finally got to this other side of it. And if you've heard my transition episode, it's actually a really beautiful way of walking through what a transition can be. So the beginning of a transition, the first stage, is the end. So in terms of this film and this story, the end was life as they knew it before baby, right? Before baby, there was no baby. They were married, they had a social life, they traveled, she had this amazing career as an artist. That was the before, right? So transition stage one is the end. So that life that they knew ended. And then they entered stage two, which is the disorientation phase, where everything just feels messy and uncomfortable. And that's where the discoveries happen, and you learn your challenges and your strengths and your weaknesses, and you're trying to figure out clarity, and you're trying to figure out what overwhelms you and what gives you peace. And it's messy, it's crazy, and you're trying to understand yourself in the process. And then you finally get towards the end of this messy disorientation phase, and you start to kind of understand and see things more clearly. You start to see that clarity, and you start to understand what you've been through and why you've been through it and what it means for you, and where you're meant to go from this process, right? You start to see ahead a little bit better, like, okay, I think I know what I need. And that's the biggest thing. I tell this to everybody. When you can figure out what you need, you're going to be okay. So as you're exiting this middle phase, this disorientation phase of a transition, you start to enter the final stage, which is the beginning, which is when you embrace the thing that changed, right? So there's a difference. The change is the event or the thing that happened. In this case, it's having a kid, right? And then the transition itself is the process of moving through what happens because of that change, and what happens to you, and what you're going through as far as changes go. So at the end of this transition, the process of accepting change, you embrace the change by fully embodying it and living it and accepting it, right? So in cases like this story in the movie, they find their balance. She finds her voice. She finds her passion again. She realizes she doesn't have to do things alone, and embracing being a mom really for the first time on her terms, where she can breathe again. When you get to that final stage of a transition, it's meant to be joyous. It's meant to be a moment for you to think, oh my gosh, I did it. Oh, holy shit, we got here. We got through that crazy phase. And that's with any change you face. That's how it goes. So it was a very beautiful expression of facing this wild, rocky change that motherhood is, and thinking you have to do things a certain way, realizing that it doesn't have to be that way because your body and mind and soul will resist what isn't for you. So even if motherhood is your biggest dream in your heart, if it takes you to that really hard place, it doesn't mean you're not meant for it. It doesn't mean you're not a good mom. It just means you need other things too. You have needs that aren't being met. If you are ever at an overwhelming place, a resistant place, a resentful place, 100%, I stand by it, I put money on it, there are needs that are not being addressed or tended to. And to close, I will say in this case with the movie Nightbitch, would love your thoughts on the film and the title and all the extra themes. But it came down to surrendering your identity because you think you have to, and not speaking up because you don't think you're supposed to, and therefore not getting the support that you need. So always know that your needs matter. Always know that they're available to you because they are just so. And when you're going through something particularly difficult, whether you love it, can't live without it, or not, it's okay that it's hard. You still have needs. And we're not meant to be martyrs. We're not meant to be perfect. And we're not meant to absolutely, completely sacrifice everything about us. Every single person, from your toes to every strand on your hair, is unique, and we are not meant to ignore the things that make us feel alive. If you are a mom and you are in this middle phase where it is just so hard and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do, you're not alone. It's very common, but just know you don't have to completely give up who you are and what matters to you, and you certainly don't have to stay quiet. Speak up to someone who cares, get it out, and you don't have to do this by yourself. And if you end up watching this movie, seriously, reach out. Let's have a little chitty chat. Let's have a little book club or movie club. And I love starting those kinds of conversations. Transition is hard, but you don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to give yourself up or any part of you just to get through it. And if it happens, you can come back to yourself. I promise. Your needs matter because you matter. I'm so glad you're here. And I love you, and you get to love you. So go take some self-love with you. And if you want to reach out to talk about the film or to talk about motherhood or hire me as a coach, I'm here for all of that. Thanks for being here. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Needy and Normal podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it generously. And before you go, please leave me a rating and a review. It would mean the world to me. If you're interested in coaching together, visit ablifecoaching.com to book your free first session. And you can sign up right now for my live coaching program that starts soon. And if you message me at ashley@ablifecoaching.com, tell me you're a listener and I will give you a juicy discount.